Hello! Today I'm going to be reading the next chapter in The Clue in the Crumbling Wall, which is part of the Nancy Drew series that I've been reading from. It's been about a week since I've read, so I'm glad to be back. I'm going to have to once a week goes by for me in my time, I lose track. But hopefully if you're going to use these videos, you can just watch them all in a row as you please. Although right now when we're first making them, there might be some delay. So, I'm going to be reading chapter 6. The title is Exploring the Inlet. Nancy promised Mrs. Fenimore that she would do everything she could to trace her missing sister. Secretly, she wondered whether she would be able to find the dancer in time to save Heath Castle for her. "May I see a photograph of your sister?" she requested. "I have a number of excellent ones," Mrs. Fenimore replied eagerly. "They're in the drawer of that table." At her direction, Nancy got them. There were 6, taken years before when the dancer was at the height of her career. Several were inscribed with her name and a greeting. The face was a distinctive one. Carefully, Nancy noted the perfect features, the beautiful dark eyes, the straightforward nose and firm chin. "Floriana doubtless has changed a great deal since I last saw her," Mrs. Fenimore remarked. "I can't seem to realize that 10 years have slipped by." "Your sister is lovely," Nancy commented. "Joan looks a little like her." "Yes, she does. And certainly my daughter has Flossie's vivacious ways," the woman replied. "She's quite a little actress. Maybe someday." As she looked dreamily into space, Nancy was afraid she might faint again. Fortunately, Mrs. Fenimore regained control of herself. Lieutenant Masters, fearing the conversation had upset the woman, said they must leave. "Please try not to worry," the Drew girl urged Mrs. Fenimore. "I'll start working at once on the mystery." When she and the woman police officer reached the automobile, Nancy declined to ride, saying she would like to walk and think about how she would start solving the strange case. The lieutenant wished her luck. "Call on me any time I can help you," the young woman urged as she drove off. Nancy wandered up the street. Children were coming home from school to luncheon. Some of them smiled in a friendly way at the girl, but many of them were rude. "It's too bad Joan has to live in this neighborhood," Nancy thought. "I wonder." At this moment, she spied the child playing with an older boy in a vacant lot. They were tossing a ball for a stray dog to retrieve. "That boy looks familiar," Nancy thought. "Where have I seen him before?" Suddenly, the boy, in a fit of temper, hit the dog with a stick. Joan screamed. "You ugly, mean brute," he shouted. "You're chewing my ball to pieces." Nancy paused. "Stop that," she ordered. "Is that a nice way to treat a dog? He hasn't hurt your ball. He was only playing." The boy, who was ragged and dirty, gazed at her with hard, unfriendly eyes. "Is he your dog?" he asked imprudently. "Why, no." "Then it's none of your business if I hit him. I'll do it as often as I please." "So?" Nancy started to reply, but it was not necessary. The dog dropped the ball and slunk off. The boy picked it up. Giving the girl a baleful look, he too went on his way. Nancy, taking Joan by the hand, led her off. As tactfully as possible, she suggested that the child ought to find a girl playmate in the neighborhood. "Jetty Hooker's the only one that lives close to me," Joan replied, skipping happily along beside her companion. "I don't like him when he's cruel like today, but most of the time he's lots of fun. He always thinks up things to do." "Why didn't you go right home to lunch?" Nancy asked. "Your mother is waiting for you." Joan hung her head. "There's nothing good in the house to eat." Nancy turned into a store, bought some sandwich and milk, and told the child to take them home at once for her mother and herself. "Oh, thank you, Nancy Drew," Joan beamed. And I won't play with Jetty any more if you don't want me to." "That's a good girl." "And please try to find my aunt for me." "I will," promised Nancy, starting in the other direction. Until they were out of sight of each other, Nancy and Joan continued to turn around and wave. Nancy was sure she had made a firm friend of the little girl. "I'm not very far from my Hardee's," the young detective thought presently. I believe I'll go there and find out if he's seen that man who crashed into my boat. She turned down a side street and in a little while came to the clam digger's home. The old sailor was on the shore repairing his rowboat. "Well now, me lass, I'm glad to see ye," the old sailor said, "but I'm afeard I haven't got good news for ye." "You mean about the boat?" "I've looked high and low for that damaged boat," the old man told the girl regretfully. "It's not tied up anywhere along here." "How about the inlet?" asked Nancy. Me Hardy admitted that he had not been there. "Too busy," he explained. "Maybe I'll go this very afternoon. I need a mess of clams, and there might be some up in the inlet. You want to come along? I'll show you the Heath factory if you want to see it." For Nancy, the opportunity was one not to be overlooked. Despite her misadventure of a few days before, she was eager to visit the spot. "Just tell me when to be here," she accepted eagerly. To his reply of 3 o'clock, she added, "I'll bring along one of my friends." Nancy hurried home, ate some lunch, and telephoned to George. She's not going to ask her other friend who found it too scary last time. Promptly at 3 o'clock, the two girls met Me Hardy at the waterfront. "I'll put you to work," he chuckled as he gathered together his fishing and clamming equipment and asked them to help him load it in his rowboat. Presently they were skimming along the tranquil waters of the Muskoka River at a rapid rate, for the old man had muscles of iron. Behind the craft there trailed a long copper wire, which gleamed in the sunlight. "I'm trolling for my dinner tonight," Me Hardy explained. "There's something yanking on her now, I do believe." Resting the oars, the old man pulled steadily on the line. A 4-pound bass flopped into the boat, wiggled from his grasp, and landed in George's lap. "Oh!" she exclaimed, jumping up and brushing water from her dress as Me Hardy apologetically took the fish. While the girls kept the boat from drifting downstream, the man removed the fish from the hook and dropped it into his basket. Then he wound up the copper troll line and put it away. "Fishing's not much good in the inlet," he remarked, "but we'll find clams there." The upper river was very still. As the little boat slipped into the inlet some time later, there was no sound save the occasional chirping of a bird. Hunching low now and then, to avoid the overhanging bushes, Nancy watched the coves for hidden boats. There were none, and there was nothing to indicate that anyone had been near the inlet for weeks. "It don't look as if we're going to find your friend," Me Hardy remarked after he had rowed a quarter of a mile up the stream. "We're nearly to Heath's button factory now. I'll anchor here." The old man had located a bed of clams in the shallow water. Asking the girls to balance his woven basket on the gunwale, I don't know that word, something to look up, he waded in to dig the clams out of the mud and sand. As he tossed them, some landed in the basket, others the girls caught and threw in. All the time Me Hardy kept singing snatches of a familiar sea songs, but each one ended with, "Clams by the bushel, clams by the lot, clams for the kettle, clams for the pot." "Basket's full," Nancy called in a few minutes. As George caught the last one, she held it in her hand to examine it. The clam looked different from the others. The next instant she stared in astonishment at an ugly purple stain on her fingers. Her dress looked as if it had been splattered with dye. "Goodness!" she exclaimed in dismay. "Where did that come from?" Me Hardy splashed over to the boat. He looked surprised when he saw George's stained hands. "That purple color is dye," he explained. "It came from this here whelk." Whelk is W-H-E-L-K. "So this kind of mollusk is called a whelk?" Nancy asked. "That's right," Me Hardy replied. It was not the shell, he told the girls, but the body of the animal inside that produced the dye. "Real dye?" Nancy inquired, deeply impressed. "The very best to be had. Whelks have been used for dye making ever since ancient times. Used with purpuras or dog whelks. They make the finest dye ever. This here whelk is the kind you can eat, too." "I'll not try eating any," said George with a grimace. She attempted without success to wash the stain from her fingers. "Is it difficult to make the dye?" "Anyone can do it. You break open the shells and remove the little animals. Soak them in salt water for a few days, then boil them in a lead kettle until you have a pale green liquid. Green? Nancy asked in surprise. Yes, ma'am, I think he's saying. The liquid is green, but when you dip wool into it, it comes out purple. I'll buy my clothes already dyed, George said, grinning ruefully. Whelks aren't used commercially here at River Heights, are they? Never heard of anyone going into the business. Whelks ain't plentiful enough around here. Me Hardy got into the boat and started off again. As they rounded a bend, the girls saw a large square building set some distance back from shore. The banks nearby were littered with discarded bits of clamshells. That's the Heath Button Factory, Me Hardy identified the place. She's sure gone to pieces since I was here last. Nancy gazed curiously at the neglected brick structure. Vines lay thick on the shingle roof, and all the windows were broken. Not expecting to find anyone around, she was surprised to see figures close to the factory entrance. 2 men were visible for an instant. Then they vanished, and Nancy was certain they had gone into the building. Before she could mention what she had seen, Me Hardy pointed to something hidden near some bushes. "A boat!" he exclaimed. "And her prow is smashed too!" The bow of the boat had been drawn up on the sand. At a glance, George and Nancy identified it as the blue and white painted craft that had struck them. "Oh, Me Hardy, please pull in here," Nancy requested excitedly. "Is that the boat you're looking for?" the sailor asked, resting his oars. Without replying, Nancy leaped out, splashing through the knee-deep water to the shore. Not to be left behind, George followed close at her heels. "Hey, where are you gals going in such a rush?" Me Hardy called after them. Nancy paused, suddenly realizing that it might be wise to proceed with caution. Tersely, she explained to the old clam digger that she had just seen 2 men disappear into the button factory. Maybe they owned the book. Me Hardy grunted. "Well, I'll bet ye a mess of clams they ain't got no right in there." "I want to talk to them," Nancy called. "Me Hardy, will you stay here near the damaged boat? If the men come, try to hold them until we get back." The sailor did not like the inactive role assigned to him, but before he could protest, the girls had gone. They're very, very determined, aren't they? I have a feeling some kind of drama is going to ensue. I'd be nervous about going in there if it were me, after what had happened last time and just kind of something about that area. Okay, I'm going to end this video here, and then I'll read another chapter.